Hey all, I'm trying to experiment with a little bit of video blogging, see how that goes. I wanted to respond to David Jaffe's rant on his blog, which was a response to Anthony Birch's rant on the Structoid about how people react to the discussion of making more meaningful games. And Jaffe has two main points, that industry people do care about making these types of games, which in part is a misunderstanding of Birch's rant, which was targeted at players and not developers. But it's true, there are plenty of devs that do care about making more thoughtful games. And, on the other hand, like, Birch is also right in saying that lots of players get defensive when the topic is even, broached. And it's hard not to see Jaffe's rant as, that kind of defensive-ness. Like, look, David, you don't need to justify what you're working on. You're getting paid by somebody to make it, and plenty of people will play it. So what do you bitch about? I don't know. But his other point, it's more interesting, is that game mechanics, rules, can't create the kind of thoughtful experiences we're discussing. Because when the player is in that state of mind, solving puzzles, optimizing behavior, etc., whatever you want to call it, the flow state, the lizard brain, being in the zone, they can't be thinking about something else and enjoying that as well, like something that the game, more thoughtful of the game is, the message of the game, whatever. To some extent, I agree, it's true, but here's the thing, like a mechanic, when it works well, is a compulsion. It, or a series of mechanics that work together, add up to a reward to get the player to do something. A mechanic can only be fun in that kind of sense, and also serve as a metaphor for something else when it's a metaphor for a compulsion. And then you get into things like The Sims or GTA, which people call satire, but in fact they're not, because they're overwhelmingly, their mechanics are, about, over many hours of play, they reward the behavior they're supposedly satirizing. GTA, you're fucking constantly killing people. How is this a satire of violence in American society? It's as if Jonathan Swift, instead of writing an essay suggesting Irish people eat their babies to satirize the Irish government's methods of dealing with the potato famine, instead he wrote a 1,000-page cookbook filled with baby recipes. It's not fucking satire, it's just kind of gross. Excuse me. Games can certainly have, mechanics that are thoughtful metaphors for things other than compulsions. It's just you shouldn't expect those mechanics to put the player in that, fun state, being in the zone, whatever you want to call it. Look at Brenda Braithwaite's board game Train. I haven't played it, but, reading about it on the internet, it sounds like the mechanics, while they may have some reward mechanisms, they eventually lead to the more sobering realization of what you're doing, sending people to their deaths at concentration camps. No one wants to play this game again. and that's fine, that's awesome and for the medium, that the game has that end result, and that people, have cried over it. There are certainly disturbing movies I don't want to watch again. Most recently, Trans-Siberian. Did I enjoy watching it? Yeah, in some sense, in the sense that I don't regret the time I spent on it, and it was a worthwhile experience. I just don't want to repeat it, and that's perfectly valid and awesome that there are now games that fit that category. That's cool. But what Jaffe's talking about is another category of games, that provide some thoughtfulness while also providing an experience, you want to play again. And to me, that's kind of in the blend between art and entertainment, like a thoughtful movie that captures an element of the human condition, but also, structured, maybe standard, Hollywood plot structure kind of way, done something, made in such a way to be dramatic for the average viewer to have fun watching it, so it's that blend. To make games in that category, I think we have to break away from the simulationist, board game designer mentality. Hey, I get it. I'm a programmer. I love that shit. I eat it up. Rod Humble's The Marriage, awesome. But the simulationist school that, stems from, MDA, the critical analysis tool, mechanics, dynamics, aesthetics, we need to break away from it, or more accurately build on top of it. Other parts of the game have to be compelling to fuse with mechanics that, are not acting as compulsions, but trying to be more meaningful, to be entertaining, like the imagery, the music, the animation, the space, whatever. We have a host of tools at our disposals, and we're handicapping ourselves by saying mechanics are the only thing that should be meaningful to move games forward as a medium. And, all those fucking, lame examples about games being 4,000 years old and nobody doing it yet, so, we shouldn't expect that we should. They're just totally fucking off base. It's just retarded. Let me introduce you what's different. The fucking computer. The games rely not just on interactivity, but procedurality. Just like Raph Koster's observation that single-player games are an aberration, and so they'll be going away in favor of multiplayer games, it's retarded. Is the internet going away? I don't think so. That's rather big difference. You know, we're not making board games. We're not making film or any other linear media. We're making video games. If you want to highlight that fact by putting it together as one word, more power to you. You know, I know in interviews, like I've read, you know, with people like Michael Mateus and Andrew Stern, who made Facade, and, you know, the Tales of Tales folks, they wonder, you know, if what they make is actually a game, and, you know, maybe they should call their work something else, but, you know, why bother? Eventually, they kind of both seem to have, you know, come to that conclusion. Like, games change constantly, you know, and the path is about, like, exploration, interpretation, and atmosphere. You know, it was compelling to me for at least a couple hours because I was trying to interpret the imagery, not because there, you know, were some fun mechanics of moving through the forest. Like, and that's perfectly okay. And so when Jaffe postulates on his blog that it's actually a function of, you know, of the player living in that experience that, you know, that cause a game to not be capable of that thoughtfulness, I disagree. Like, instead, you know, I mean, what I'm saying is that it's simply the fact that we're motivating player behavior through mechanical compunctions that, you know, prevents them from, like, engaging at a higher level. But the beauty of the medium is that it's a plastic one. You know, it's a superset of all others. You have this ability, you know, unlike others, to put somebody in another character's shoes and have them live their experience, but at the same time, you know, you can use text, you can use movies, you can do whatever you want. Like, it's beautiful. I don't see why people get so angry at the suggestion of doing something like relying on cutscenes. And I'm not saying all games should use cutscenes, but invariably that's what a lot of people with that board game design mentality take that statement as. Do whatever it fucking takes to get your message across, you know? I mean, if there was a really interesting game that explored thoughtful meaning through its mechanics, but relied on the crutch of cutscenes to make it more compelling to a larger group of people, why would you not want that game around? Like, it's still furthering the medium, even though it has to rely on that crutch. And maybe, you know, the next time the same person makes, you know, a similar game, they'll have learned how to get past that one crutch. You know, growing doesn't mean you have to fail. It means you have to not try to do everything all fucking once. You know, treat the medium as a holistic art. I don't see how we can possibly move forward without thinking laterally, you know, at times, and considering all possibilities outside of those we, you know, narrow-mindedly view as mechanically superior. Excuse me. And, I mean, the last point I want to talk about is something, you know, Jaffe said on Twitter. I hate to do the internet thing of picking on, you know, one quote, but it's in the tone of his blog and his video as well. You know, he calls out people for complaining about this while not trying to make these kinds of games. And, you know, even in Anthony Burgess' case, it's not true. Like, he's actually trying to make at least one game that was, you know, an attempt to do something more thoughtful. But it's really hypocritical of Jaffe to sit there from on high with the security of his Sony deal, making the kinds of games he wants to make, you know, by his own description, you know, are not these kind of games. You know, for him to say that, it's just hypocritical. Like, he's complaining about people complaining about not having these games, while, you know, self-avowedly having no interest in making these games. You know, with all due respect, David, that's total fucking bullshit. You know, you're doing the exact same thing you're accusing, you know, Anthony Burch of doing. And, you know, complaining about the problem without being part of the solution. You don't want to make these games, you know, I have no problem with that whatsoever. That's perfectly fine, you know. More power to you. I enjoy your games greatly. But to sit there and bitch, you know, that other people aren't leaving their jobs, putting their home, their possessions, and everything on the line to make these games when you're not, go fuck yourself. Like, I mean, you know what? I mean, I've written, you know, on the blog for over a couple of years now about trying to make, you know, more meaningful games, and, you know, while I try to avoid complaining about it, instead try to avoid, you know, delve into the issues about, like, designing them and building them. I think the discussion about them, complaints or no, is crucial to moving forward. You know, what doesn't move the discussion forward is someone, you know, like yourself, high stature, saying it probably can't be done, so go and show me, you know, and you know, calling names to the people who, you know, do or do not. So you know what, you know, I did leave my fucking job, and I am trying to make these kinds of games, and I know quite a few people at this point who are, you know, enough to make me think that if you're saying something like that, you're not aware of them, and, you know, if you're gonna bitch at people to do something so risky, you know, when you're not in that position, and, you know, don't want to be in that position, like, what the fuck, you know, maybe you should just shut up about it. Yeah. Anyway, there you go. Hope you enjoyed it. Later.